Welcome everybody. I'm Eric Schraus.
I'm Dan Meisner.
And we're here from Orchard today to talk to you guys about what we think will be the future of making online and how to kickstart the crowdsourced design movement. How many makers do we have in the audience today? There we go. It's a rhetorical question, right? We're all makers, whether you like to tinker with electronics, or if you like to cook, or if you like to fix things around the house. If you like to create and improve and contribute, you're a maker. We're all makers. It's part of the human condition. And with the right tools and the right ideas, makers have always been at the tip of the spear, driving innovation and building the future. We ourselves are makers as well. In fact, we're here to tell you about something that we've made, and we're extremely excited to do that. But before we do that, we'd like to just take a step back and talk about the history of making and how we got here through a story, just to set the context and set the stage. So it all starts about 3 million years ago with Joe Maker, and he's pictured below right here. He built the first tools known to mankind. And although the tools were simple at that point, it was just a hammer, the impact of that hammer was immeasurable. It was a tool he could use to make things. It changed everything. It was an inflection point in our species. And so eventually, Joe shared his idea for the hammer with other people, with other makers, and they formed the first maker spaces. And there they created more hammers, and they collaborated on building things like shelters, and they shared ideas about hunting. So fast forward a few million years, and Joe has continued to improve this hammer. This time he's building it out of things like metal. And he and his maker friends are enjoying things like agriculture, and trade, and writing. And they've even started to lay the foundations for math and for science. And these advancements were also inflection points in our history, and they were driven by Joe and other makers who were bold enough to ask questions and to push the limits. And they were able to do this with the right tools and the right ideas. Does that sound familiar? Right? We're all makers. We've always been makers. So fast forward a few more thousand years from that point, and we're almost caught up with today. Fast forward to Orville and Wilbur Wright. They're below. What are they doing? We all know the story. They're building an airplane. They're trying to be the first people to build an airplane successfully. And how did they do it? They built on the technology that came before them, and they pushed the limit even further to create the first flying machines. This was also an inflection point. You see, our history is marked with many of these kinds of inflection points. Just think about the advent of electricity, or the combustion engine, or even the transistor. All of these events dramatically changed the course of our species, and they were all spawned by the efforts of makers. So here we are today at the Atlanta Maker Faire, and we're all still at the tip of the spear of design and technology and innovation. You've all had a chance to look around the fair at this point, and you can see that our tools are more advanced, and our numbers are greater, and our goals might be loftier, but we're still building on the technology that Joe and his friends laid before us, and we're still the source of many of humanity's greatest inflection points. So what will the next inflection point be? Well, to answer that question, let's take a look at how Joe makes things nowadays. So let's say Joe wants to make something. He has an idea. Well, where does he start? What does he do? He probably starts online, trying to find something similar to what he's trying to make. And it's hit or miss, but this time he finds something, and he downloads it. But he has to edit it, because it's not exactly what he's looking for. He doesn't have access to the right tools and technology to do that, nor does he know how to use it, so he enlists the help of one of his friends to help him edit this design towards what he wants. And they iterate like that for a while, and they actually post the design back to the forum where they found it in order to get some feedback and see what people thought, till eventually Joe's satisfied, and now he wants to make it. Well, he doesn't know how to make it either. It's complex. Should he 3D print? Should he CNC it? I don't, what does that even mean? I gotta export the file? It's confusing. But eventually he finds some help, and he finds a 3D printer, and he finally prints what he's looking for. So that whole process took several weeks, right? And all Joe really wanted was a slightly modified version of something that someone else made. He wanted to evolve that design further. How many people have ever felt like Joe when you're trying to make something, right? I can just about guarantee that everyone here has felt like Joe, can share in that frustration to some degree. But why is it so hard? Why is it so hard? Well, here's a few reasons. Our design tools are expensive and they're hard to use. It's hard to get started, right? What about fabrication? Like I was just saying, it's complex. How do you actually make something? How do you actually take that design and make something? Who do you give the file to? That's hard. What about collaborating with other people? If you're trying to collaborate and together work to build something, you got to use the right software, the same software together, make sure that's the right version, make sure your file's up to date, all that. How about inspiration? Where do you go to get inspiration to start making? You see, this problem is particularly frustrating because we have this amazing resource, and it's called the internet. And the internet transfers bits around the globe at light speed. It connects people with tools and services right at their fingertips. Here's my point. Where do you go online to find information? Google. Right. Where do you go to watch videos? YouTube. Exactly. Where do you go to find information about your friends? Facebook. Well, where do you go to make things? Where do you go to collaborate on design?
We'll get to that in a minute. But before we do, we would like to propose that we're on the cusp of a new age, a new inflection point that once again is going to be defined by access to this new technology. Because now we have the ability to harness the connectivity of the internet for everyday tasks, which is actually also known as crowdsourcing. I'll give you a couple examples of crowdsourcing. So, crowdsourced encyclopedia, you know as Wikipedia. Airbnb is a crowdsourced hotel. Kickstarter is actually crowdsourced funding. And Uber is crowdsourced taxis. So you can begin to see how things are changing and utilizing the internet for some new and innovative technologies. And so what does this mean for the future of making? And what does this mean for Joe Maker in the future? What will his life be like? Well, we'd propose it be something like this. Now Joe Maker has an idea for the best new product. He's stuck, so he seeds the design to the internet. And now Jane sees his product and suddenly realizes it's perfect for her widget. So she combines them. And Joe sees this, he's inspired, and he has a bunch of new ideas because of this. So he continues to design, and people from all over the world start to see his designs and iterate on them and work on them. And so now it's evolved into 5 different new products that he had never even imagined could exist. And so he 3D prints a few of them to use, he orders a couple 3D prints, and he's learning a lot. He continues to create new designs, building his portfolio of designs, and people begin to recognize them and pay him for his work. He starts getting job offers, and he begins getting compared to famous designers and becomes famous himself. Joe loves living in this new, glorious, and futuristic way of making. The good news is, the story of Joe isn't in the distant future. The site where this is possible exists today, and if you hadn't guessed, it's called Orchard. Orchard is a new, free, online platform for crowdsourced design. It has everything you need to collaboratively and digitally turn an idea into reality, including a database of objects made by people from all over the world. And all those objects were made using built-in professional modeling tools that run right in the browser. And as you can see, it has a simplified interface, which really helps reduce the learning curve. And whatever you make, you can actually order a 3D print of or print it locally, along with tracking the evolution of the object or editing or printing any of the branches along its evolution. And so now the process for Joe is massively simplified. He has his idea, he seeds it to Orchard, and he gets the result he needs. The site is brand new, it's currently in beta, but as Eric alluded to, it was built by makers, for makers, because we want to provide the tools to other makers so that Joe Maker can continue to do what he's always done. But this time utilizing the internet to participate in essentially a global online perpetual maker fair. And with this comes so many unanswered questions like, what would it mean to have millions of minds with access to this technology? What new levels of innovation would result? And what kind of products would emerge if they were made by people, for people? And with millions of minds, we could start to eventually crowdsource everything we see around us, from chairs to cars, houses, and even spaceships eventually. But if we can get to the point where we can crowdsource spaceships, we can begin to crowdsource solutions to world problems. So this is really exciting times. But we can't forget the story of Joe Maker, because it was with his ideas and access to technology and the right tools that throughout the ages he was able to build the world around us. But don't forget, Joe Maker is you, and the baton is now passed to you. Because now you can connect with people from all over the world to create anything you can imagine, and you have access to tools that nobody else in human history has ever had access to. And so we think it's time for people to come together and collectively build the future. Thank you.